You've
Well,
got our questions already, I assume, I hope. Some of the, I don't know how many people responded, but you can start with that, or if you want to give us your overview and um, let us know what you have to say tonight. It'll be that's why we're here.
well, Al, why don't you start by introducing them if you're prepared to do so?
I don't have the bio in front of me, so I probably would butcher it. Can you would I'd ask you to do it. So
Well, I just want to welcome Marti Hopper and Fran Shur from way out west in Colorado, Colorado 9/11 Truth. Um, they're both psychologists and have a long history of understanding the problems that people have in overcoming their reasoning ability because of trauma and what have you. And I'd like to just hear them expound on that for themselves. I'm just so honored that they were able to join us.
Thanks, Susan. I'll make a quick correction. In Colorado, you need a PhD or a PsyD to be called a clinical psychologist. And I only have a master's degree. So I have a measly little master's degree. So I call myself a psychology professional. I worked as a psychotherapist for many years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
wow, that's pretty interesting.
My father was a psychology professor.
Ah.
Yeah, and so I didn't even know that the regulations were different in different states.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I can get started if you'd like. So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Marti Hopper. I'm a retired clinical psychologist. I do meet the criteria for the term. And yes, we did send our bios, but I have worked in the field. Most of my career was actually in the area of corporate psychology, management training, team building, conflict resolution, communication skills, that type of thing was most of my career. But my last 12 years, I worked for the rape crisis team here in Boulder, and obviously working with trauma victims in that line of work. And as I mentioned, I am happily retired, I would say, so I can do things I love to do, like activism. I just a personal note, by the way, for all you out in Boston, I grew up in Schenectady, and my stepdad was from Worcester and a big WPI alum, you know, active in that his entire life. So I'm very connected with all of you out east, but have been in Colorado for 43 years now.
I'm in Worcester.
Oh, you're in Worcester? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My grandfather went to WPI.
Oh my gosh.
He was the first graduating class in electrical engineering.
That's what my stepfather was in. So
yeah, Susan is the representative of the far west in Boston.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of the state. We're not out in the Berkshires.
right, not that far. But anyway, so it's just a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you tonight. By way of the 9/11 Truth Movement, I got involved in that in 2005 when there was this huge surge of people getting involved, 2005, 6, 7, that area. I think video availability, YouTube and so forth apparently was a big part of that. And then I sought out Fran's Colorado 9/11 Truth Group. So she was way ahead of the game. She had already established a group and just have been an activist ever since. And Fran and I are now part of what we call the core team. That's for Colorado 9/11 Truth, how we make that's our decision-making team. And there's 9 of us on that team. So that's kind of how we operate. So Susan reached out to ask us to talk about the psychology of 9/11. And specifically, she and Al asked us to speak about a couple of things. And the first is like, why is it that there are still people who refuse to acknowledge what happened on 9/11 and the facts behind 9/11? And then the second thing was, what would we suggest as effective ways to talk to people so that they might accept it? So what we thought is each of us is going to talk for about 20 minutes and just give our thoughts on those 2 things. And then we can open it up to questions and interaction. So if Susan and Al, that sounds like an okay plan, I'll go ahead.
Yes, very good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, you bet. So, all right, so I'll get started. So for the first question, what are some of the reasons that people are still resistant to hearing this information? And I think, in my experience, one of the main reasons is that they're unaware of the information. They just don't know about it. I recently talked to I actually had the opportunity to talk to 3 different people in situations about this. And as I often do, bring up, did you know a 3rd building fell in New York on 9/11? And all 3 were like, no, what are you talking about? So people still do not, they just are unaware. And of course, we know why, which is the continuing government cover up, the continuing media complicity in this cover up, and the use of this word conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorists, which I'm sure you've noticed like I have. It is so pervasive now in the media. It's just remarkable how when they pulled that out in I think it was 67, and now I just flip on the radio or the news and there it is all the time. And it does its job, and its job is, of course, to shut down any alternative information, to shut down listening to alternative information. So if something does get out, well, that term is applied, and I think people don't listen. So a lot of it, people just aren't aware of the information. And if they do hear it because of that term, then they know it's not credible. And so they, will stop listening to it. And people love their mainstream news, the evening news and the, and beloved NPR and so forth. So they're just not getting exposed to it. I think another reason is that the government narrative is so ingrained now in people's brains. This is 23 years. And I think, and this isn't my expertise, but at a neurological level, my understanding is these kinds of narratives are literally embedded in us, and it's very difficult to hear a different narrative as the years go on. Now, if someone is open to the information, then of course, as again, we all know from our activism, we just get a myriad of reactions. And that's simply based on individual differences. Who we are, what's our background, what's our cultural background, what are our life experiences? Do we have experience with trauma? Did we know people who were killed on 9/11? And all of these experiences, of course, create a belief system, or many belief systems that each of us holds. And as humans, we are guided by our belief systems. And our actions are, if I believe, for example, that if I go to college and get a degree, I'm going to make more money the rest of my life, I might spend 4 years and a lot of money and be in big debt to get that degree because I believe it's going to have a certain impact down the road. Now, of course, if we're presenting information on 9/11 that people have not heard or that goes against their belief systems, of course, we're creating in this term that pretty much we all know at this point, cognitive dissonance. And that is when there is an individual has two different pieces of information that conflict with each other, that conflict with their particular belief system, for example. And that creates an internal tension. People are upset. They are often anxious or fearful. Let's say, you know, on a personal level, let's say you had a best friend growing up in high school or something, and you heard that they were arrested for bank fraud. Okay, I just kind of made this up, but all right, now, okay, this is going to present some cognitive dissonance for you because it's like, wait a minute, this was my best friend. I really like this person. I can't believe they would do something like that. And so now you've got this internal tension. And what people do when that happens, people will work to resolve that tension because we don't like the feeling. As humans, we like something called actually cognitive consistency, where everything, you know, the attitudes, beliefs, the information we have is consistent with our belief systems. And so what might we do about our friend? We might call other people. We might look online. We might look for newspaper articles. We might lose sleep. We will do something to resolve that tension because, and of course, that's what we're all dealing with when we're presenting this alternative information on 9/11 is we are challenging people's beliefs about how the world around us works. Of course, the classic example is, you know, the US is, we're the good guys, our government is wonderful. And when we say our government may be complicit in what happened on 9/11, that creates obviously that tension for people. So when we're talking, so what happens in these situations? So as I say, because people will work to resolve the tension. So what do they do in the example of us being activists on 9/11? So one of the first things people do is they discount the evidence. So they feel comfortable again. So for example, I had someone tell me, oh, I know why Building 7 fell because it was, some of you may have heard, it was built on top of a subway and that wasn't stable. It wasn't able to hold the building and that's why it collapsed. I had someone tell me there is no Building 7. I'm like, what do you mean? And she just kept saying, you're making this up. That there is no Building 7. And I'm like, well, of course, as I often do, invite her to go home and look it up for herself. You know, look at the evidence for yourself. But that's an example of discounting the evidence. And again, that term conspiracy theory works beautifully. It's a conspiracy theory. You can discount the evidence that you're hearing. It's not believable. Another thing people do is they find evidence that supports their own point of view, like that subway comment that supported their belief. And it's basically, again, I'm sure we've all heard at this point the term bias confirmation. We look for information that supports our belief to confirm our belief. Another thing that people can do is they discount the importance of the information. And for example, how important 9/11 is and still is on our lives and how it's influenced our entire world. But what I often hear these days is 9/11, that's old news. That's just not important anymore, right? That is a way to discount the importance of the the evidence. Now, another thing that people can do is discount the, kind of the kill the messenger. So they discount the person telling them the information. Now the term conspiracy theorist works beautifully. Oh, they're just a nutcase, conspiracy nutcase. And I had this happen to me recently. Within the last 2 years, I was involved in a protest against some things our governor were doing. It was not a 9/11 issue, but in Boulder, downtown, our Colorado's governor's from Boulder, so he has property here. And so it's like, oh, well, let's protest downtown in Boulder. And I said, well, I'll be the press spokesperson. So we had this protest and actually got press coverage. News from Denver came and the local paper wrote a big article and I was quoted, of course. Well, 2 days later appears a letter to the editor, and this letter is written by someone I know personally. In fact, it's the sister of one of my very best friends and next door neighbor. And she writes this letter attacking me personally, saying Marti Hopper is the leader of a cruel mob. She must not care at all for youth mental health. She's, quote, these are quote, lazy, mean, and hateful. Okay, so, which is hard to read, and that's all that ad hominem attacks. But that's an example of, and then I play pickleball. I love it, and I love the community. And so then I go to play the day later, and a friend that I play with comes up. Was that you in the paper? Are you the one that said that? You are one of, people like you are among the most evil and selfish people on the planet. It's like, okay, well, we did more protests, but I asked not to be the press spokesperson so that I could maintain some of my friendships. But anyway, that's by way of a personal example of how you attack the person. Now, that's hard to do when you look up to the person. You admire them, and this is the reason on the news you always see where they bring in the general, the admiral, the top scientist, whoever it is, because they do hold what's called position authority and credibility, and people are much more likely to believe them. So that's another dynamic that's going on. So what else can people do when confronted with information that is new to them or they don't believe? One thing they can do is actually embrace it. They can, like Al's example of his, I forget if you said it was your nephew or a family member, they can actually look at it. And again, depending on we all bring something different to the table. Some people are open to this, maybe younger people, or they don't have the same reaction that those in our generation do, or my generation. So, that is possible that people can embrace it, depending on, again, their own openness to information, their trauma background, their own history, and so forth. So those are just some thoughts on how people react, why we are still getting resistance, and what we are seeing. Kind of a way to think about what it is that people are doing and how they're reacting. So moving then to how to talk to people about 9/11 and just some thoughts from my reading and experience is actually the first thing for me is a decision about whether or not to even engage in the conversation. And again, we all do this, but I don't randomly bring it up. At this point, I look for some kind of opening. So let's say I'm in a line for coffee and it's on the anniversary and there's a news story about 9/11. That might present an opportunity to bring it up. But I don't tend to just randomly bring it up. That's because it is such an emotionally charged issue that, and I have no idea if it's worth it, like if people will be even open to it. So I'm looking kind of at the context. And then secondly, for me, is the relationship, like who's this person? Is it someone I've never seen, like in the coffee shop and will never see again? Or is it a family member? Because that, or someone my neighbor's sister, or it makes a difference, obviously, because of the risk to the relationship. And that's something I always weigh. If it's family, like my family, they all know I'm a 9/11 activist. None of them agree with it, but that's okay. We just all know this and we love each other, and we're not going to bring it up and talk about it when we get together because it will endanger the relationship, and that is such an important relationship. Whereas others might not be, it's worth the risk. So that's another obvious consideration when we're talking to people. So if I do choose to bring it up or engage in a conversation, and we at Colorado 9/11 Truth are doing less outreach since COVID, like a lot of groups, we're doing more online things. So we used to do a lot of outreach and more face-to-face. And again, that was, we're setting up an opportunity to talk about it there. But that is not so much the case these days. So when I do talk to people or the opportunity comes up, I use a kind of a framework for me, and it's whether to engage with, when to offer facts versus listening and attending to people's feelings. So kind of facts or feelings. And the reason is, we all know that 9/11 is a very emotional issue for people for the reasons I already talked about. And it's because it's emotionally charged. One problem we have as 9/11 activists is we have a lot of facts. We have so many facts, 23 years of facts, right? I can't wait to unload my facts on people. That's what I want to do. But I have to really consider, are they in a place to hear them? Because what I've learned, and we know, facts will not convince people whose belief will not allow them to hear the facts. They have to be able to hear them. When that wall's up, it doesn't matter what facts we have. So I'm making a judgment all along when talking about to people about which way to go. So an example is, and this was many years ago, we were tabling for 9/11. A man walks up to us and he says, he goes, "I'm an American Airlines pilot." And he kind of looks at us and we look at him, and then he says, "I know people who died on those planes." All right, now he's presenting, do you think he's ready to hear about facts? He's obviously in an emotional place. Now, the person sitting next to me, we could see he was upset. The person sitting next to me said, "Well, how do you explain Building 7? Okay, so this pilot looks at us and says some not very nice things and walks off. Because, of course, we didn't meet him where he was emotionally. We ignored that and went for the facts, and we lost a potential ally. And I'm sure he went out bad-mouthing people in this 9/11. We talk about, 9/11 and 9/11 truth. So that's an example where an empathy statement would really have been the appropriate response. And then that might have opened him up to hearing what we had to say. But just simply throwing facts at him, that wasn't going, that backfired. Another thing I try to do is try to find some points of agreement. Again, it might be factual, it might be more on the feeling level. Like when I first was trying to decide whether to tell my sister that I was 9/11 Truth activist. And I decided, well, I'm going to tell her, you know, what, and this is a really important part of my beliefs in my life. And so we're on the phone. She lives in a different state. And I told her, and I was going to New York for a protest. I told her this, and it was just silence on the other end of the phone. And then I said to her, I said, it's really difficult to believe our government would do something like this. Well, all of a sudden she said, yes, that's exactly how I feel. So now she's nodding, I'm nodding, and I feel that way too. So we found a point of sincere agreement, and then that opened a door for her to then hear more of the information and why this was important to me. So, and then finally, just not finally, but a couple more things to say. I have found that asking questions can get me a lot further than kind of throwing facts at people. Again, I'm sure we all do this, but I typically start with are you aware that a third building collapsed in New York on 9/11? When we were doing more activism downtown Denver, there's a building very similar. It's the biggest skyscraper in Denver, and it's very similar to Building 7 in size and everything. And I could point to it and say, see Republic Plaza there, and then people would like, you know, what do you mean that came down in 6/7? And I found that kind of opened people up by asking. I might even ask, these days, what's your understanding of what happened on 9/11? Well, that gives me tons of information of then where to go if they're willing, you know, to engage, or I may find out they are not willing to. Basically, you know, this asking questions is a Socratic method. If it can also get them to question their own thinking and beliefs, it kind of encourages them to do their own critical thinking and find holes in their own logic. Because if they say, no, I've never heard of Building 7, I often say, well, isn't that interesting? You might ask yourself, what's the reason that after 23 years, you've never heard of a building that size collapsing on 9/11? Let them, you know, kind of ponder that. So finally, I'll end my time with a few things perhaps to avoid. Again, going back to that 9/11 is an emotional issue, that we can do things that really people react negatively to, and that ends the conversation, gets us nowhere. And this also applies just to our lives in general. But obviously, we want to avoid personal attacks or name calling. And you may think, oh, I would never do that. Well, I know we've all seen people, other activists do this, like, this building is blowing up. Look at this. How blind can you be? You know, can't you see this? Versus what does this look like to you about how this building is coming back? Avoiding the use of never and always. Like, you always cut me off when I bring up 9/11. You never do the dishes, whatever. I'll assure you they'll find the one time they did the dishes, right? So those terms, these are all things that will get a defensive reaction and shut down the conversation. Of course, I've seen people get into shouting matches, raising our voices, interrupting people, or being defensive ourselves, or over-explaining versus giving a shorter explanation, seeing if they have questions. And the last one of these I'll mention, that again, I would challenge you to use in your own personal life, is to avoid using the why question. And I call it a 3-letter word. And it isn't the scientific why, like, you know, why do the stars shine, or why, you know, what's the science behind the collapse of the buildings. It's the interpersonal why. So, and it typically is starts with why, and then it's either did you or didn't you do something. And when you ask someone why they did or didn't do something, you guaranteed pretty much you will get a defensive reaction. And the like, well, no matter how simple it, well, why didn't you stop and get the milk like I asked you to? Why did you bring that up at the party? You know, why didn't you get home till 2 a.m.? You know, you're gonna get a defensive reaction. Why do you think the government doesn't lie? They lie all the time. All right, so these don't advance a conversation. Now, if you would like to know why, you can ask it, but I'd suggest 2 different ways to ask the question. And one of the best is with the word, the phrase, I noticed. I noticed that if I mention 9/11, you get up and leave the room. Okay, and then you just stop talking, and that will tend to hopefully get someone to talk. Another way to ask it is just say, what is the reason? What is the reason that you didn't pick up the milk, or that you brought that up at the party? But I noticed is really good. I noticed that you brought XYZ up at the party, and we had agreed not to talk about that with other people. Okay, so again, this was really important in our personal lives, but also in any kind of emotional conversation around our 9/11 activism as well. So I will stop there. Those are some thoughts on why people are resistant and perhaps some ways to approach folks. And we can turn it over to Fran.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you. Very insightful. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions for you, but let's let Fran talk now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did we want to go right into my talk, or does anyone, do you want to, Susan, do you want people to ask questions of Marty first?
I think it might work best because I think most people will have questions for both of you.
Okay, okay.
Is
Well,
that
I'm
agreeable
very,
to everyone? I think so.
I'm sorry.
I think that would be agreeable to everyone.
Okay, great. Well, I'm really interested in what Marty said, and I'm especially interested in those Socratic questions. I want to adopt that and use that more. That's really brilliant. So I kind of reversed the questions, and I started out on how I personally approach people about 9/11, if I do at all. And then I go into some of the reasons why people resist this. So can everyone hear me okay? Everyone hear me fine? Yeah, okay.
I can hear you. Are you on the main view? Is Fran on like the main view? Susan, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Yeah, you need to
I'm
put the
sorry, I
spotlight on
forgot to
Fran.
pick Fran.
Yeah.
Here we
The
go.
spotlight.
Yeah, spotlight.
So everyone can hear me okay? Because
Where's spotlight?
okay, okay, good. Just let me know.
There you are.
So I start with how in the world do we get others to listen to 9/11 truth information? So my thoughts are these, that every one of us are very different regarding our life experiences, our understandings, our goals in life. So we will approach others very differently. And I'll let you know a little bit about who I am, and this will explain how I approach others as I do about this very taboo subject. So for me, unless I'm giving an actual presentation on 9/11, I personally do not approach people with the goal of getting them to accept 9/11 was a false flag operation. I don't approach others with that goal. I may look like a social justice activist, and I am, but that's not primarily who I am. What is of primary importance to me along with my commitment as a parent, a grandparent, and a friend, is what I call my psycho-spiritual growth. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. This entails having an inner spiritual path, a psycho-spiritual path. This entails the practice of finding appreciation for other people, and thus gradually becoming less and less judgmental of others. And with this goal in mind, I do not approach others to get them to believe the way I believe, and or even to engage with me on the dialogue of 9/11. However, I actually love approaching people with a thought of seeing if I can simply just connect with them. The goal that I have is opening my heart to them, and finding appreciation for whoever is in front of me. I enjoy seeing into people, finding empathy for them, and enjoying them as unique expressions of the divine. Now, that may sound like I'm a religious person, but I'm not. I'm not religious at all. But my inner spiritual path directs me to see all of us, even people who have toxic behavior, as manifestations of the divine. Like many of us on our planet these days, I have had some mystical experiences that have shown me that all of us are one. We are all one. We are not separate. So because of these experiences I've had, my daily life has become a practice of recognizing others at this level. And by the way, this usually means always being kind to people. However, it does not mean being unaware. There are obviously people who are toxic. There are people who are dangerous. And there are people who just have a lot of issues that they have not healed yet. But in my view, they are still a manifestation of the divine. They are just very ignorant of their true identity. So this is how I see everybody. And this has become a practice of mine of relating to people in this way, of trying to see their true identity, who they really are. This entails usually asking questions of the person in front of me in order to simply to get to know them better. It usually means listening deeply to them and appreciating them. So that's my goal, really, is appreciating people, whoever's in front of me. So even though finding my appreciation for others is my primary interest in my life, hey, I'm still an activist. I'm a 9/11 truth activist. And I'm also a COVID vaccine activist, and I'm a peace activist. I'm an activist, or I would say an educator, on anything that I have studied and that I'm interested in. And this means that if a controversial subject is on the table, my aim is to have a civil conversation about it and to be transparent and honest about my feelings and my beliefs. But most of us in our society do not have the skills to converse civilly about controversial subjects. Now, this is probably why my father, when I was a child, he said, honey, never ever talk about politics, religion, or sex. And so in other words, you better keep the conversation shallow and thus safe. That is, if you want to be liked by other people. So obviously, I did not follow his advice. This would be just way too boring for me. So there are times when I'm talking to people, when I see an opening, and that's what I look for, an opening. My primary interest is getting to know who they are, just for that sake alone, and developing appreciation for them. But as an opening comes up in the conversation, that will lead me to bring up the subject of 9/11. And I really enjoy getting into the dialogue and getting the dialogue on a deeper level and a more interesting level. Otherwise, I can get pretty bored with small talk. So I will let people know, in that case, I will let people know I am a 9/11 truth activist, or if any other issue comes up, be it COVID or Ukraine or whatever, I will let them know I have done some research into the COVID vaccines or Ukraine or whatever. I, of course, always continue to observe the reaction of the person I'm talking to. Oftentimes when 9/11 comes up, and I find this to be about 50-50, about 50% of the people I talk to about this, just people on the street, you know, people in a gathering, whatever, about 50% of the people know that there's something amiss with the official story of 9/11. And about 50% do not know. They've never heard of it. But sometimes this person will hesitantly, you can tell they're very hesitant. They will hesitantly let me know that they've always thought there was something wrong with the official account. So I'll continue to explore that topic with them and eventually hand them David Chandler's card with his website on it, 911speakout.org. And maybe they may be on the other side of the fence. They've never heard of the 9/11 Truth Movement. They've never heard that there was any question about what happened on 9/11. They're shocked. So I may ask them in that case if they know a third building fell on 9/11. And usually they do not know. In that case, if there's any opening at all with them, I will direct them to David's website and ask them if they haven't heard about World Trade Center 7, direct them to the first film on the top of the page, which has that film of World Trade Center 7 collapsing, and I'll ask them to just at least look at that film. I may say that if their curiosity is piqued, they can then listen to David's 1-hour talk given at the University of Colorado on free fall. And if they get more curious, there are many other short films and articles that they can explore. But I always keep it very simple when I'm approaching people, not getting into more controversial areas that can be debated. And of course, then I'll hand them David's card. And because I like his website because it's very simple and easy to navigate. Now, there are many people too that think they know everything about 9/11. And they've got so much disinformation, you know, it's like then the challenge is trying to challenge their disinformation. So that's another challenge, you know, is how do you get them to look at the fact that they may have accepted some disinformation about the whole 9/11 issue. I also tell people that very often I tell people that if they're doing a cold search on the internet, please beware, because they're likely to run into a tremendous amount of theories that are very unsubstantiated. And they will probably become disgusted and stop looking into the topic, because I'll say we've been infiltrated and we have, you know, all sorts of crazy theories out there that, and so I'll let them know where they can go to get good links. So anyway, this is the approach. This is why I approach people in the way I do. My goal is first and foremost to connect with a human being in front of me, and then see if something interesting comes up in the conversation. And sometimes I will initiate the 9/11 subject, just kind of depending on what I'm feeling about that person, if I have time, you know, and if it looks like there may be an opening there. So that's how I approach people. Now, why the resistance by the people still out there who don't know about 9/11? And some of you may know I've written a very, very long serial essay called "Why Do Good People Become Silent or Worse About 9/11?" That essay, that serial essay now has 24 segments. by doing the research on the psychological reasons that people are silent or worse about 9/11, I have come to understand why people just do not want to know. They do not want to hear any evidence that disproves the official story. And more, this is the conclusion I'm coming to, that that people really just do not want to know. So why are people not curious? Why do they not want to know? What I sense is that they want to be in line with their community of family and friends and neighbors, and they don't want to be different. To come to the conclusion that 9/11 was a false flag would be very, very inconvenient for them. This is especially true if one lives in a small town where everyone knows most of the other people. I think the fear of being shunned and ostracized is huge for most of us. Maybe, I'm sure all of us, unless we're psychopaths. We need community, we need relationship. I was thinking of that when Marty was talking about her other experience in Boulder, which is a much smaller town than Denver. And I can say whatever I want to say in Denver, and who's going to notice? You know, I mean, it's such a huge city, but Boulder's a much smaller community, and a lot of people know a lot of people there. I have another friend in Paonia, Colorado. She has to be very careful about what she says about 9/11 because it's a small community. And it's much more difficult for people in those small communities. I know people in Durango, Colorado, very small community. Everyone knows everyone. And I think people's fear of being ostracized can be very intense in those small communities. So there are many reasons, though, there are many reasons that people just do not want to know the information. And they are explained in my serial essay. So I've covered many topics, and they include the anthropological research on how new ideas get into every society on the planet. These essays cover denial in order to avoid cognitive dissonance, what Marty was talking about, that very uncomfortable feeling of being ungrounded. And I've covered our human tendency to conform. We're very conformist creatures. We're very conforming. Our tendency toward groupthink. Also why prior knowledge of state crimes against democracy makes us more likely to listen to 9/11 truth evidence. For example, if we've studied the JFK assassination, or if there's other what we call SCADs, or state crimes against democracy, that we know about those, we're much more likely to listen to 9/11 truth. I cover the research, the psychological research on learned helplessness, on dissociation. I cover American exceptionalism and nationalist faith, and of course, the big lie. I also cover the research on true sociopaths and other personality disorders that can cause people to carry out such atrocities as 9/11. There's more topics too in that serial essay. So when I finished writing on the psychological research that answered the question about why people resist this topic, this taboo topic, the architects and engineers writing team for whom I was writing these essays asked me to write about the media. And I was hesitant because I'm not an expert in the media. But I agreed with them, the AE writing team, and I also agree with Marty, that even though the psychological reasons are indeed very powerful, arguably the greatest reason that people are silent about 9/11 and don't want to know about 9/11 is because the media is silent and ridiculing. So as I said many times before, in our society, our mainstream media tell us what it's okay to talk about in polite company. So doing this research has on both the psychological research and the media has helped me gain more and more understanding about all of us humans. We all tend to believe and obey authority. That's just how we're wired. We become very attached to our beliefs. This is actually how our brains are wired. So if someone gives us information that contradicts our belief, we're thrown into cognitive dissonance. And that's very uncomfortable. It makes us feel ungrounded. It makes us feel confused. And we have to, as Marty says, we have to come to, what was the word you used, Marty? To cognitive consistency. And as David Ray Griffin said in Experts Speak Out, we all differ in how we receive this information. He speculates that there are 3 types of people. One, there's evidence-based people who may be able to change our belief. These people maybe have changed their beliefs more easily, depending on the evidence that they hear or read. Others of us are belief-based people, and we tend to hold tightly to our beliefs, become very anchored in the belief that we have, and we don't want to change it. We're very stubborn in trying to keep to those beliefs. And others of us, as he says, are fundamentally wishful and fearful thinking people, so that we will likely have a very difficult time changing our belief in spite of evidence to the contrary. That is, if we ever change our beliefs at all. So circling back to how I approach people about 9/11, again, the research into the psychological dynamics and the media dynamics has given me greater understanding about why people resist this 9/11 information. And this greater understanding helps me have more empathy for those who do resist it. And this empathy in turn helps me become more appreciative and less judgmental. So the actual intellectual research has helped me with the understanding of who we all are and why people are so resistant. So if you've not read my essays, and if you feel inclined, you're interested, you can find all of them now at 911speakout.org. And you can go to 911speakout.org and then /Francis-Shur. And so that's all I have to say. And so thank you all for listening. And I really look forward to any questions you might have.
Wow, thank you, Fran. That was beautiful. I couldn't help noticing your eyes glancing down. Do you have this whole thing written down for you?
Yeah, I do. I have notes here, and I just wanted to be
wonderful.
sure I have notes so I don't wander all over the place. So
If you can flesh it out into an article, I think it would be spectacular.
oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I will open the floor. Everyone who has a question, I'm going to try and be vigilant as a moderator. Raise your virtual hand. If you don't know how to do that, go to the bottom of your screen and it's reactions, and it says raise hand. Any questions? Or shall I start it off? Oh, there we go. Hands raised. I think Sandra was first.
Yeah, thanks. Can you remove the spotlight so that we can all see each other? Not that I don't like looking at Fran, but
all right. I'm not a techie, so give me a moment to find Fran in the ribbon here. Where are you, Fran? I have to find her in the ribbon to do that. Oh my goodness. Sorry about this, guys. Maybe I can do it on here.
You can do it in the participants list too.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Remove spotlight. There we go. Thank you, Jean. Okay, go ahead, Sandra. You want me to spotlight you?
No, please don't.
Okay.
I could spend like the next 5 hours talking to you guys. It's just so compelling and so that, I mean, there's so much to say to this. And I do have one question, but if it's okay, I'm going to try to cram the little points that I wanted to make as quickly as I can into the next couple of minutes. The one comment was Marty had mentioned about asking questions. I think that's, as psychologists, I think that's a great tactic, because you would know that you never provide the answer to a client. You ask the questions that lead them to the answer. And it's so much more powerful if they can connect the dots and come to their own conclusions than if you just ram it down their throat. So I think that is perfectly in sync with who you are and what you've done with your professions. I just wanted to mention also to Marty when she said, instead of asking why, to say, I noticed, I often ask, can I ask why? May I ask why? And that softens it a little bit, because I'm actually asking for permission to ask my why question. So I find that pulls me through. As far as cognitive dissonance, it's, when you talk about people being conformist and wanting to belong to a group and a tribe and whatnot, in my experience, a lot of it comes down to lack of self-esteem, because if you don't know who you are, then you look for that identity in groups around you. So you have to kind of like take that into account. I think self-esteem is a huge issue with a lot of people on many levels, but and that obviously comes back to childhood and all of that, right? Yeah, my 22-year-old son told me recently, he goes, do you remember the thing that you told me when I was like 10 years old that I never forgot? And I'm like, wow, if he never forgot this has got to be really good. And I said, okay, shoot, because I have no idea what you're going to say. And he says, you told me once to never forget that adults are just kids in grown-up bodies. And I'm like, yeah, no, I do remember saying that, but that's something else that we can't lose sight of when we talk to grown-ups, because they come with all of their baggage and all of their, these emotional knee-jerk reactions that go, so, when Fran, you were talking about trauma and stuff, it's absolutely that. So you have to tread very carefully. So that's what I wanted to quickly say. Oh, and just a quick note also, after 22 years, yes, I think it's more ingrained on the one hand, but I think it also helps because people are less attached to being right about this, and they're less attached to their vision of it. So I think with time, it works in our favor that people can gain a certain distance from, from what they believed. And so, sometimes that works the other way. Anyways, my question was, and it's kind of almost not related, but it is related, obviously. But I would love to know if you had any suggestions on how to approach not people who don't want to hear it, people inside the movement that are hell-bent on division. And, it's my particular struggle because I swear by unity and peace and on the things that we all agree on, and putting everything else aside. I don't, but I get pulled in many directions by people who want me to take a side and throw that person under the bus, and that person's a bad guy, and that's a mole, and that, and so it's all about competing theories, but they become competing, psychological issues with people. Like, how do we get past this division in the movement? How do we talk to people who, even if we disagree on certain parts of the narrative, even if we have different theories, like, how do we get beyond that to just focus on the big picture and work together instead of all these different factions that are all, we're so scattered. And that's my biggest challenge on how to handle it. I try. I mean, it's, taking the high road is great, but it's taxing. It's really taxing. It's, it's just something I deal with on a regular basis. And I would love any feedback you might be able to give on that.
Fran, do you have some thoughts on that?
Good question. Good question, Sandra. The first thing that comes to my mind is that I would be very surprised to learn if there was any movement that did not have division in it. I think it's going to be a fact of life for any movement. I was reading, it's actually a link that I got from Kevin Ryan in one of his essays, that I think it was a research by the ACLU, that 6% of progressive movements, peace and justice movements, were infiltrated. And they gave one example of how the second in charge of this Green Party campaign was one of the infiltrators.
Wow.
So one of the, obviously the strategy was to get an infiltrator up to the highest level possible. And there's also people, I mean, just forget about that. I mean, the 9/11 Truth Movement is not going to be the only social justice movement that's not ever been infiltrated. That would be naive to believe that. So I think it's very likely we have that issue, but I don't go around accusing anybody of it, of course, it would only be destructive. But the other thing is that in our movements, social justice movements, we're going to have people that are not healed, that have a lot of issues and have very strong biases and very strong beliefs. And there's probably not going to convince those people to be the way we want them to be, So what would I do if I ran into a person like that? I'd first of all listen to them, as deeply as I can, and then just say, look, I hear you. I just don't agree. I don't agree with your view. And I'm sure you have your reasons for your view. I have my reasons for my view. And so we're going to have to agree to disagree on this. Doesn't mean I don't respect you. Just treat people as kindly as possible. And that's probably off the top of my head what I would do. And just say, but mainly also say, I don't think that being divisive is constructive toward our movement, and you're not going to change them. That's one thing I think is a hard lesson for us to learn, is that we're really not going to change people when they hold strongly to their own beliefs. So that's all I have off the top of my head to say. I'll let Marty or anyone else, I'm sure other people in this group might have things to say about that. How do you respond to what I'm saying, Sandra, by the way?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And maybe I don't have as much empathy as you suggest, because they come so hard that it's even though I'm aware that I'm being defensive and I try to keep myself in check, and and then I just switch into hyper rational mode because I don't want my emotions to overtake things. But it just always leaves me with a frustration of just being pulled in that direction. And
because
need to work on that. Yeah.
yeah, because we're very attached to wanting this movement to succeed, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I jump in with a couple thoughts. I really appreciate everything you said, Sandra, and also this particular question. I struggle with it. I have been on, I agree with you. I just think it's divisive and hurts the movement. Versus a scientific approach. Like scientists agree, there are different approaches. Okay, that doesn't mean we have to like go to attacking each other personally, which is what I see happening. That just doesn't advance the cause, which is the bigger picture. So I agree with you with the frustration. I've been on calls where when I hear that, I will speak out and say something to the effect of what I just said, that this isn't helpful. That usually doesn't work. Of course, another approach with any kind of conflict with anyone is to, reach out to them individually and directly and try to work it out. And certainly Fran and I threw out Colorado 9/11 Truth. I mean, it's impossible for there not to be conflict and differences, but sometimes that can work on an individual level, but I think with these divisions in the movement, I haven't seen, and some people, like Fran said, not being healed. Some people, I guess, in my view, more practically, are not workable. You could try, they're not, it's not going to work. All are any wonderful technique. It's not, they are going to be who they are going to be. And then it's a matter of moving on. I heard Ted Walter on one of, he's been on a lot of time, and I can't remember which one, but he gave the most beautiful statement I could find it about this. And he said, this, I forget the question, but he said, this type of approach is so divisive. And that's what's important. He just backed up. What's important is it was something like those buildings collapsed in a way that does not support what the government said. That's what's important. We can argue about the particulars, but that's what's important. And he just stated it very beautifully. But again, it's not going to work with everyone. So
Right.
I'll stop there.
I'll just mention one other quick thing too, Sandra. There's a person in our group that I always felt he had it in for me. He's doing things that were challenging me in some way, always, And I finally called him up on the phone, and I said, here's some things you did. I specifically said what he did, and it was under your breath, but you said these words, in the group to me about me. And I said, that's very hurtful. It really hurt me when you said that. And I'm wondering if you would like to talk one-on-one, about why you say those things and why you have that behavior toward me. And he didn't, but he stopped doing it. It was really interesting. He stopped that picky, petty behavior, and so far anyway. So I guess what it was is I knew this guy is not trying to, he's not an infiltrator and he's not a bad person. He just has issues. Mm-hmm. And so the approach I had was to just reveal my feelings.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment, when I run into the divisions within the group, I always remind people to attack the facts and the evidence, not the person. You'll be a heck of a lot more effective. And that usually shuts them up because they can't do that.
Yeah.
If I could just add one quote from St. Augustine: in the essentials, unity; in the non-essentials, liberty; and in everything else, love.
Oh,
And if we can all agree that we were lied to That's a good starting point on 9/11.
Could you say that again, Jean?
Saint Augustine in the essentials, unity, in the non-essentials, liberty, and in everything else, love.
Wow. Wow, that's great. All right. So I think Ray is next. No? Yes? No? Or Chris? I think you both raised your hands at the same time.
No, it was Jean was first, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It was a wonderful wonderful talk from both Marty and Fran. So I enjoyed it, and was I was just making some notes, listening and making some notes, and the word belief came up a lot. It's a belief. We have a system of our own beliefs, and that guides us through our life, and we certain things we disregard because we have a belief, and it's you know, people who refuse, and it's always like the other person refusing. It's always about the other, but it's also coming to a sense in oneself that we believe a certain story about 9/11, and we all have our vision about this day, and we constructed that in our own minds, and it doesn't. I'm not going into details. It's not necessary. It's about the belief we all have about kind of we know this story, and I think that's also this cognitive consistency, that we try to make a story which is rational for us, and I think that's the thing. But is that the story? Is that the truth, or can we persons, human beings, change our mind that actually we are sometimes really talking disinfo, in a sense that we do not even know what we're talking about. We took the words from people who we trust and combine them, and we can make mantras over what we think happened on a day. But there's this field of unknown in the movement, and I think therein lies a lot of truth that we do not accept because we have a belief. We have a belief in our own minds that we know, and for me, it was always about 9/11 is about the facts. I only look at pictures and videos, listen to the people who saw it on that day, and try to make a picture of all these stories, all these pictures. And then there is this thing what's missing in the 9/11 truth movement is this. If that falls in place, everything falls in place. And that's the thing that we all have to be mentally capable of changing our own belief. It's really inherent to judge your own story, judge it, because I think that's the thing. We always look at the other, but it's judging it every time we talk about it. Do we know the facts? Do I know the facts? Do I really know the facts? And that's the thing. And I think that we are all here. We are all here. And that's the thing, that there's only one truth. There's one story that happened that day. And I never did hear it from anybody. So I think there's a lot of change we have to do within ourselves, and adjust your thoughts.
Did you have an actual question for Marty or Fran?
Yes, are you willing to change your beliefs? Is that's the thing? That's the question.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to respond to that. I really appreciate what you're saying, Ray. In fact, on our Colorado 9/11 Truth header, we ask a question, and it's, do we know the truth? Because, and you're right, we all have our belief systems about it. I mean, I love this, what you're saying, and we're not above it or beyond. We're just the same as the people we're talking to. We're coming with our beliefs and our set of facts and everything that you said. So I think completely agree that we have to constantly learn and challenge our own thinking, and to come and say we have the truth. No, one thing that my husband Bob, who's also a psychologist, and I have learned from 9/11, it really changed our entire worldview. And so for the past 22 years, every time we hear something that sounds so outrageous and just like you've got to be kidding, or what, every time we hear any of this, we look at each other and say, that could be. And we need to be open and look at that. And it's changed our life, we think, for the better in that way. So I thank you for your comment.
Yes.
Yeah, and Ray, I would agree with Marty. I think we all have to be vigilant about letting in information that we don't agree with, and sifting it through our own, the evidence that we have at hand. Yeah, we have to all be vigilant about that. I think one thing for me that I've realized after more than 2 decades of looking into this is, one thing I'm have not done is, I wish I had been more vigilant in actually looking at some of the debunker sites, because I think even though I know that they were simply debunker sites, I could probably learn something by listening to their arguments, and I didn't do that as much as I think I should have, so yeah, it's a very good point and I would say, yes, we all need to be vigilant about that, and just be as dispassionate as we can in looking at evidence, because we do have a way of discerning in our Western society. We have a way of discerning what the truth is, which is basically evidence. And so, unless I have some super, reason for, believing that the evidence isn't, I don't have any mystical or any great insight into things that, that tells me what the truth is. It's just the way I know what the truth is to go by the evidence. That's the best way I have. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Jean, I think you're up next.
All right. I'll try to do this in 90 seconds because I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks, Boston 9/11 Truth, for doing this. Thank you, Fran and Marty, for being here. A couple takeaways, right or wrong. I heard 2 methods, a direct approach with poignant 9/11 statements and questions, and an indirect, get to know the person first before you do that. On the strategies and questions part, I heard about the Socratic method, and I wanted to share quickly. This is a Christian guy, but it was a great point. It was called the Columbo tactic, named after the bumbling and seemingly inept
Oh,
TV
yeah.
detective his remarkable success was based on an innocent query. Do you mind if I ask a couple questions? And he says a little bit. Other times the question is an open-ended, what do you mean by that? A follow-up question, how did you come to that conclusion? And he says, occasionally someone would quip, I don't have any questions, I just believe it, to which I ask, why would you believe something when you have no reason to think it's true? So I love that kind of
That is
keeping them
great.
on their heels by keep asking questions. Next, I heard about cognitive consistency. I love that idea and trying to get people to be cognitively consistent. I think TAP and Richard Gage are doing that by bridging connectors to other government corruption. And Fran even mentions other state crimes against democracy. I think that's a way to try to get people to feel like, okay, this is safe to start to approach now. And then what I try to do online, make memes to show simple fundamental truths so that if they can understand these simple fundamental truths, then okay, now it's maybe I can tread in those waters a little bit more. And I've been trying to entertain the idea of using humor to disarm, but it's really hard because you have to be super delicate to do that. And I'm talking fast. And now to my question. Thank you. That wasn't bad. That was pretty quick.
Very good.
But most 9/11 truth advocates are introverted, and their thoughts or action. Oh, most 9/11 truth advocates are introverted. Could you give us thoughts or actions as baby steps that they can do to be more out there?
Hmm.
Well, what do you mean by most 9/11? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I see a combination. I've seen the 9/11 truth advocates, especially early on, who are more introverted, who have done all that research. I mean, it's perfect.
Uh-huh.
They're at home working, where they are providing all this research, providing us with the evidence, making timelines and so forth. And to me, that it's a team. Like, we are richer for being different. And that the people who are, let's say, stereotypically introverted, that's what they're delivering. I'm an extrovert. I can be out there talking to people. I will take the work they have done and then put it to a form, or, to put it out there. So to me, in the movement, I haven't necessarily seen what you're saying, but I certainly feel we're just the richer for all the differences that we bring to the table.
True. I mean, if I may, because I think we know these people, you can go from one end of the spectrum, Dave Cool, and you can go to Richard Gage. Both are fantastic people in this movement. I guess my question is more like for Sandra and I that run in the 9/11 War Room, and we want to encourage activists. How can we sort of help bring people out of their shell? What kind of things could we give them as little things to do or things to think about that they could try to break that barrier?
So you have people who you want them to be more out giving the message. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah, because I definitely do appreciate the introverted, typical, stereotypical, as you said, introverted people. Yeah, they're fantastic. But if we're trying to grow a movement, yeah, I guess I'm kind of seeing
I
where
guess the
you're.
question is, how do we get the activists to become a little bit more active and to not be intimidated from, just going out there and doing whatever it is that they can do.
I guess
Because
here's an example. Richard was with us at Ground Zero, and Sandra and I are sitting comfortably behind the table. And Richard goes, "No, here's how you do it." And he sticks a bunch of flyers in our hands and says, "Get out here." And he starts walking up to people and just handing it to I'm like, how do we mentally make that breakthrough to, I don't know if there's any great answer here or anything bigger.
I'll let you know, Gene, that Richard Gage told me that he said, Fran, I'm actually an introvert.
Oh,
I've just I just get out there and do stuff anyway. So I think there's a spectrum of introversion, extroversion. Some people are kind of right on the cusp, and other people are very introverted. Like, I think of Dave Cole, look at all the fantastic FOIAs he's done and the research he's done.
mhm.
which has been so constructive. And then, there's people like Richard Gage, who you think was an extrovert, but he tells me he's an introvert, So
Well, maybe it's one of those fake it till you make it things, you just have
Yeah.
to keep on doing it
yeah,
until it becomes natural and normal and you fall on your face a couple of times and you
yeah,
realize it's not going to kill you and you just keep on
Yeah.
going.
Well, fake it till you make it. I heard that Barbara Streisand was naturally introverted, which is hard to believe the way she gets out on stage and projects. But I guess somehow you just have to take the bull by the horns and do it.
I guess I could just
I mean, a
appreciate,
couple things,
I'll just
That's how
appreciate
I got
Marty's.
into, that's
A
how I
couple
got into
things.
sales. I was an introvert and I forced myself to be an extrovert, and now it comes much more easily to me.
Mhm.
I'm gonna,
Gene, I guess a couple things that come to mind. One is, you can do what Richard did, just lead by example, here, I'm out here doing this, come and invite them in, join me in doing this. Doing something alone is pretty scary. So another thought is when something's structured, it's much easier, like a structure, like, we used to have a booth, right? If you have a booth, then, you can have the introverts might be sitting there, but then you can invite them out and why don't you come out and stand with me while we talk about what's on this poster board, or so that they're not alone. So I think providing structure might be a good way. Maybe you have people all over the country and that's not real possible, but even, flyers and handouts that they could use, but not being alone, leading by example, I think, and providing a structure might help.
I love that. Thank you. And I really appreciate enjoying the fact that we're just all over the spectrum. So thank you for that.
I had the same experience as a newspaper reporter. I used to be super introverted, and I became a newspaper reporter, and I had to go out and interview people and get in people's face. And I was really excited by the job, so I kind of trained myself to get more extroverted during my 20s and 30s. I'm not a newspaper reporter anymore. I was just going to say that the fewer words at first definitely is something that worked when I was out handing out flyers last time. And I asked people, would you accept a flyer? I didn't just stick it in their face, and if someone said no, or was belligerent, or just rejected it, I just totally was not confrontational with them, or just let them go. I didn't even say anything to them. And it was interesting because it also seemed like, because I was handing out flyers that had to do with the Halsey study, that people, it was in Boston, right? So people actually were kind of interested in them, and I noticed that if I avoided saying anything like 9/11 truth, that, I hate to say that, but if I didn't say 9/11 truth or anything like that, I just said, this is a study about Building 7, and people were pretty interested in it. We're more likely to engage, I guess.
Very good. Well, I think you're up next, Rebecca. Did you have something more you wanted to ask Fran and Marty?
I don't know. Did you guys just hear me talk?
Yeah.
On that.
Okay, but you were tailgating on Gene.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's all I had to say. Thanks. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for joining us. That's awesome, Rebecca.
Great.
So I guess I'm up next. Oh boy, I have so much. I'm not sure what I want to start with. I love the Socratic method and how you talked about that. The idea of listening first, talking after you find out what page they're on, where they're at. That's, I think, really important. I guess what I'm gonna, and I also wanted to say, strangely enough, I was listening to a podcast on, what is it called? Deep State and other crimes. I can't remember the name of the podcast, but I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. But someone who's generally I don't like to listen to because he's so confrontational. He actually had an excellent analysis of what goes on with cognitive dissonance and the way people use the powers that be use divisive methods among the public, and that was Adam Ruff. So I actually recommend that. No matter what you think of Adam Ruff, I thought he did an excellent job breaking it all down, and pretty much repeated what you and Fran and Marty had said tonight. But my question is, the controller at work and I are good friends, and we've pretty much been on the same page all these many, many months of working together on political issues and recognizing how, we've been lied to about the media on this, that, and the other. So finally, I approached him about 9/11 and asked him if he was aware of Building 7. And he said, "Of course, you think I was born yesterday? Yes, I know all about Building 7. And I also know that those cowards who brought down Building 1 and 2 were just cowards." I was dumbstruck. I couldn't believe he would know about Building 7 and still talked about Islamic cowards that brought down Building 1 and 2. Maybe that's a unique situation, but I was dumbstruck. I didn't even have a comeback. And of course, afterwards, I had all kinds of comebacks in my mind, but it was too late. But I couldn't understand where he could have been coming from with that kind of statement. I don't know if you run across anything like that before.
I have. Yeah, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. The theories that people can come up with to get them back into cognitive consistency. I've had things like that happen. It's just absolutely stunning. Like, I had one person who's obviously a very right-wing person, it's a friend, who said, I see that those buildings came down with controlled demolition, but I know how that happened now. When Bill Clinton was in office and the 1993 bombings happened, they laced those buildings with explosives under Bill Clinton's auspices, under his direction.
Whoa.
All right.
Talk
Very
about
creative.
conspiracy
Very
theory.
creative. I had another friend who's very liberal, who said, now, I know that Obama probably knows all about this. He probably knows all about this, but he's such a good guy. He would not tell the American people, because it would be devastating for the nation. The stock market would crash, and it'd be terrible for our nation. He knows, but he's choosing not to tell us. Okay. I'm stunned at the creativity of people,
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, I couldn't resist writing about that, So yes.
Susan, it's my experience, my belief at this point, that people can rationalize anything at all. We're really good. We're real creative. I could go out and stab and kill someone outside walking their dog, and I could rationalize it in my mind and we are really good at that. So there's no end to the creativity of the human mind, I think.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, what is the goal? Like, is there a concrete goal when you're asking people, you know, you're going up to people with a flyer or something, like, are you trying to reopen or bring about a new investigation? Because like often I found that I mean, I lived in New York City on 9/11, so my mind just goes back. I know there's been so much amazing research and an entire like kind of field of study related to this at this point that's brilliant. And I think it's an amazing grassroots effort in America. Like it's one of the most heroic and amazing, you know, grassroots effort in America. But like I always go back to the need for a new investigation into 9/11 because of the crimes of that day. Like I feel like if a person has like theories or something, you know, like I often try to just, I mean, I guess I talk to them about the need for an investigation. Like, I don't know what happened, but I feel like we need to really look at the evidence and reopen an investigation. You know, I often wonder like about just focusing on a goal, like in activism, you know, just like a very finite, small goal, like bringing or getting people to sign a petition or something like that. You know, that's, I guess, what maybe sometimes I feel comfortable with.
Well,
If I could just quickly share that that's exactly what was said in that Columbo tactic here that I didn't read. It said, where is it? Most powerful when you have a game plan for the conversation. Generally, when I ask a question, I have a goal in mind. So
Right,
you,
that's right, yeah.
that's exact. Anyway.
I think all of us have
I had an interesting
goals.
situation. I was flying back from California and this guy was bending my ear for half the trip. And he finally asked me what I did. And I said I was almost partially retired and I worked on some political issues. And he kept asking me, well, what is it? What's it about? So I said, this is a good way to shut this guy up. I'm going to bring up 9/11. And so for the next 2 hours, he's sitting next to me, and I brought him through the whole story. And the takeaway at the end of it was he asked, well, what is the ultimate goal? It was 20 years ago. What is it that, you know, he said there have been other, you know, I talked to him all about false flags. And he said, well, there historically have been a lot of those. And you know, they come and go. And so I started asking myself, well, what are we asking for, you know, really? And I think one of the most poignant videos I've seen just recently is listening to Chris Joya with Richard Gage just put it out for the Papa group. And he talks about it very personal about three of his best friends that died there. And he's the real deal, along with Angulo, I can't pronounce his name, Raul. And they were having a conversation about how they look at tall, high-rise buildings. They both, you know, were very detailed about no way that we were lied to, that they would never do that as fire chiefs, that, you know, that they being told to vacate the building. Anyway, if you have a chance to listen to that, it got my juices flowing where you know, this guy lived through the whole thing. They were both there. And there's no ambiguity about how they feel and why they continue. And they're, you know, frankly pissed off and they want justice. And I think that's where I come from. You know, I want justice. I want to, and you go to the, you know, ultimate goal of, well, what happened in South Africa, what would they call it? The conciliatory, I've forgotten the name of it now, but
Truth and reconciliation.
reconciliation, exactly.
Truth and reconciliation, yeah.
Worst case is we'd have a reconciliation, but these people are still in our government. The neocons that created this whole mess and are part of it. You take Kagan, Newland, Blinken, you know, they're all promoting war. And I want them out of there. I want them out of my government and get rid of these people. That's my goal. And then to take them to, to have justice for what happened to, these guys are still feeling the pain. The rawness of how they talk is unmistakable. And so do yourself a favor, go listen to it. I forgot, I think we posted it, or Sue, you did on our actual agenda items, I think.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah,
go
I
there.
did too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, that's my answer to all of that.
I had an additional thought on that, is that actually I lost it. Did you have an additional question, Al?
Well, no, the question originally was, what do Fran and Marty, when they get that question posed to them, how do they handle it? What is the ultimate goal? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, I like what you said, about justice for the victims, for the families, for, globally, honestly. And the other thing for me is, at this point, is that if we don't expose these things to a wide variety of people, it will just keep happening because they can get away with it. And that's to me is frightening.
Yes.
We just look, people aren't getting it. So then they all get sucked in, and these same techniques of the media, the propaganda, everyone continues to be sucked in, and, what is next? So that's kind of, for me, the reason.
Thank you both for saying for that, because I feel like sometimes I get very intimidated to say that I really want justice for the victims of 9/11. And also I get intimidated to say that we have these people in our power structure still, and they're really dangerous, and we can't continue to, we really need to get them out.
Your word of power reminded me what I wanted to comment on. These people who are very powerful are powerful because we give them, the public at large give them the power. But if the public at large, more and more of us wake up to their lies, they will lose their power. That's my belief.
Yeah. And I've had people actually often say the same sort of thing to me, which is, Fran, what do you hope to accomplish by all this? It's like, well, the question really is, why are you wasting your time? And my answer is always, look, I would love to have justice. I would love to have accountability, but I really don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. However, it doesn't mean I'm not going to keep working. I'm an educator, and I educate, but because I don't think we're going to have a healthy nation if we sweep this under the rug, And just as Marty said, I say, if we let these perpetrators get by with this, then they're more emboldened to do something else that is harmful to our democracy, harmful to people. If we don't educate people about these things, then people will not suspect when the next state crime against democracy happens. And so I also just say, I do it because I can't not do it.
Mm-hmm. It's
not possible for me to not do anything about this. I couldn't live with myself. That's just how I'm wired. So millions of people have been killed and had their lives disrupted. And this needs to be brought to the attention of the world, and we will not be a healthy nation if we sweep this under the rug and live in a fantasy world. Like, I have actually had one person just recently tell me, well, maybe it's actually good that people don't know what really happened on 9/11. Do you agree would you agree? No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree that we're healthy if we live in a fantasy world. You can live in a fantasy world if you want to, if you need to, but I choose not to live in a fantasy world. I want to know what reality is. And I think that's what will make us a healthy nation. So that's how I've answered it.
I agree with you completely about living with yourself. I cannot go back to something, when I know it's like having a murderer live next door to you and knowing that the truth and doing nothing about it. I mean, it's just not the way I'm wired.
I think also that if you live in a delusion, you are setting yourself up to be exploited. Like, I mean, you're just setting up you're allowing yourself to be exploited and lied to. It's kind of crazy, really, when you think. I mean, that's what you just said. But
Can I make a comment?
Please. Go
I
ahead, Jack.
can't raise my hand. For some reason, it won't work. But as I've told the group, I studied PR propaganda at MIT, and that's right near where Bernays lives. I was invited to one of his birthday parties. I didn't go. But one of the techniques is to overcomplexify. I said that wrong, but make it too complex. So people, if bad news comes out, they come out with so many different stories that people aren't able to think clearly. And I think we need to keep this in mind and get our message down to something much more simple, like a variation of 9/11 was an inside job. I know we didn't get far with it at first, but I think that's the way to go, because people don't care about what hit the Pentagon, and it's very hard to get any attention even about Building 7. But just the oversimplified comment that 9/11 was an inside job, a variation of that would be best, in my opinion.
I have another comment on this whole issue, which is that's why I say to people also that the reason what we are doing, we activists, is we're not only educating people, but it's so important that we do the best research possible, that we do the most scientific research possible on this whole subject, because a real investigation may not happen in our lifetime. I will be surprised if it does. However, the people who research this in the future must have the best scientific information at their fingertips, and we're providing that. That's why it's important to be accurate. It's important to have really good research. So we're not seen as a bunch of kooks. We're seen as real scientifically thinking people and have done the best research that we pass on to the next generation or the next generation, who can then do the research and the looking into it. It's kind of like with the JFK assassination. It's like we got some good research out of those people. So now 60 years, some odd years later, people like James Douglas are able to write a fantastic book called JFK, The Unspeakable, and they had all the good research at their fingertips because of what people did back in the 60s and 70s. So it's important that we are serious about the research. We do serious research, we do accurate research, and we pass that on, so that people can look into it in the future.
Would you guys mind if I bookended this, if this segment's coming to an end, with a 55-second clip from Marti Hopper on the 20th anniversary video he made? I really I love what she says here, and I think it would all help us. Queuing it up right now. And here we go. As soon as you see it, here we go.
And I still believe today that the two greatest barriers we have to breaking through with 9/11 are corporate media and also people's beliefs. And those are very huge barriers. They still exist today. But I think we still need to work through those. I also feel that my understanding of those barriers through the 9/11 Truth Movement has really informed everything I've done for the past year and a half in understanding our current situation. I see how this all ties together and how important it is to continue the work to find and expose what is happening in our world.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Jean, for sharing that.
Yep.
Great. That's a
Mark, he quotes that all the time.
Yes, I do.
How did Marty Hopper say that again? His hospitals, corporate media, and public opinion.
That's very sweet. Thank you, Jean.
Yep.
Very sweet.
Thank you both. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love the Columbo thing, the Socratic method. I love Columbo.
I do too. I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, it's I sing in two barbershop choruses, and one, this big barbershop national judge, he says, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that's for a reason." Because we're supposed to listen to each other to get a good sound and work together. And so that kind of is fitting, I think, for some of the things we've been talking about.
I want to thank Boston. Thank you. It's so much fun that we have this technology that, Colorado and Boston can come together and have this discussion. So thank you, Susan and Al and everyone. It's just wonderful to be able to, join across the nation,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. And it's been such an honor having you join us. I hope to get to meet you in person sometime. And I know I've spoken with you, particularly Marty, who helped me with some grief issues. Thank you very much, Marty. It's thank you. Thank you. I can't say it enough. And we'll be getting this up on our website, this recording. And so much appreciate. I think everybody who joined appreciated your comments, found a lot of insight with this, and we could go on for hours, literally
We should do
hours.
it again, Sue, if they're up for it.
I would love that. I would
Great
love
to have
that.
a
I still
continuation.
have so many questions, with family members and what have you. But that would just get way too long, and I would be watching paint dry while I'm getting the download and the upload. So thank you again. Thank you again. I hope you do well and join us again. One last question. Do you want to stay on our email list to see who our next speakers are?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Keep me on.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Will do. And I hope you do join us again, even if just to be part of the listening audience and with question and answers, but definitely would love to have you speak again.
So it's 8:30. We have the agenda items for Boston 9/11 Truth. I don't know if it's too late to go over them, but Fran and Marty, if you want to stay on or hop off, it's entirely up to you. It's getting awfully late into the evening here.
Yeah, that's the double-edged sword with having speakers. But yeah, you're welcome to stay on. And Al, I think I would stop recording at the end of this session and not record, or maybe have a separate recording for the agenda items.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll bow out because I need to have dinner. And,
Okay.
but thank you